comes from there. Now, as far as Solomon being jet black, that's another misinterpretation of the scripture, because we don't read the Hebrew and we don't study it in the royal Amharic, and we don't study in the language that shows the gender. You see, everything we read in the language in the Bible, there's a gender. There's genders there, and that shows you the agenda as well, but there's gender in the scriptures. And what people are misinterpreting is the part where in Song of Songs, where it says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem. That is not King Solomon speaking. It's not King Solomon who's speaking in the Song of Songs saying that I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem. Let's get it right here in the scriptures. I'm so happy Anonymous Apostle, he brought this up, because we tried to talk about this earlier, but you know, some people wasn't getting it, thinking we're talking wrong things and everything. So we just said hold up on it for a moment, and now we're at a point that we can now, you know, bring this up again. Song of Songs 1 and 5, it says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Even if you can't read Hebrew, you should recognize that it's not Solomon speaking of himself. Because notice what is being said right here. He's comparing, if it is Solomon, he's comparing himself to his own curtain. That makes no sense. It should actually read, if it is Solomon talking in Song of Songs 1 and 5, it shouldn't say, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, which is the Arab, one of the Arab tribes, or the Ishmaelite tribes, as the curtains of Solomon. He should really say, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as my own curtains. Shouldn't it say that? I mean, this is just in the English. On the English level, you can understand that's not Solomon speaking. As it goes on, it's talking about, some would say the Queen of Sheba or the Queen of the South. You understand? Really being spoken about here parabolically. You understand? Where it says, look not upon me in verse 6, because I am black. This is the queen. This is the female who is speaking here. Because the sun hath looked upon me. In other words, she's saying that she is melanated. She is melanated. You understand? She's melanated. The sun, she's carbonized, in other words. Literally, she is carbonized. And we know that carbon is that black organic molecule that everything in creation is based upon elemental carbon. Because the sun hath looked upon me. It doesn't mean she has a suntan, but she is Ethiopian. She is kissed by the sun. This is the link for Queen of Sheba in the Bible. So how dare some of our Hebrew Israelites avoid this and then want to talk about we black, and the people of the book is black, but they want to recognize, are you not as the children of the Ethiopian, of the Neo children of Israel, the Bani Kushim. And we're going to touch on the fact that Kushi in the Middle East, even to this day, means nigger. And Kushi is basically saying Ethiopian, which is to say black. And this is what's being said right here in Song of Songs 1 and 6, where it says, look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. You see, today we look at a blue-black so-called person who's dark skinned. We look at that negative, but that wasn't looked at as being negative before. That was looked at as being positive. So when David was ready, the first thing they thought about was, yes, they thought about Esau. It was like, how come? And see, that's because of his Moabite lineage from Ruth, you understand, that came into the line with Boaz and with Jesse. So they looked upon being blue-black or dark skin, having that fine black complexion, so-called Negroid or Kushi complexion, as being positive. You see what I'm saying? So when one had a reddish brown, which to them reddish brown was light skin, they began to look at that like, what's wrong right here? That's like Edom, that's like Esau. That was the link within the Israelite psyche. That was the link within our ancient psyche. You understand? So when she says that my mother's children were angry with me, because she still maintained that original complexion. And notice, the so-called Khazarite, or the so-called white Jewish, Indo-European Jewish Ashkenazi people, they still say that it's about what your mother is. It's about what your mother is that is important. If your mother is a Jew, then you're a Jew, regardless of what your father is. This is what the Jews even say to this day. It's important what your mother is. Now notice this right here with the mother of Menulik, which is the mother of David II, with the mother of Bain Hokim, you understand? With the mother of Ibn Hakim, Bain Alehem, who is speaking about Queen Sheba and King Solomon's only son, saying that my mother's children were angry with me because she still maintained that original complexion, that original blackness. You understand? While a lot of people were mixing tribes. That's why it's so mixed up today. And so all this racial idea is not understood anymore from its root or from the truth. You see? So when you're reading this part right here in the scriptures in Song of Songs, although it's a Song of Songs of Solomon, but it's almost like a play. Like theater, you know what I mean? There is different characters speaking. You see, this one time was used, even they call it in the marriage ceremony. This was used as a play, and even we have translated this. That's why we know this very well. We've translated this. We've gone into the Hebrew. You understand? Shari. You understand? We've gone into the Ethiopic, Mahile, Mahali, Solomon. And we begin to break it down so we can understand exactly who's who. A lot of our teachers, even though they mean well, they are wrong about the racial identity being spoken about in Song of Songs. Song of Songs 1 and 5 is not speaking of King Solomon. You see, King Solomon's complexion is really mentioned further on in the song. Now when you scroll the scriptures forward, when you go forward in Song of Songs, and you go now, you compare this to, here's Solomon being described in the Bible. Solomon's complexion as well as his garment is being described in the Bible. Remember when Jesus Christ says that Solomon, you understand? I mean, notice the flowers and everything like that. Notice how they're arrayed in the different colors, yet Solomon was not arrayed like any one of these. You understand? The word Solomon kept to the basic standard wear of righteousness, which was the white linen, the pure white linen, the white garments. And it's a very important reason for linen, and we need to invest in linen. We need to start to wear linen garments. We need to start to wear linen, even undergarments. We'll go into that hopefully with the disciples and with the elect in another pod. But right here, let's touch on Song of Songs 5 and 10. Where it says, my beloved. Now this is the queen speaking. This is the maiden, the Shunammite, as she is called in this. She is speaking, saying, my beloved is white and ruddy. My beloved is white and ruddy, the chief amongst 10,000. It is speaking of King Solomon. So I say, get a good Bible. Get the Schofield Study Bible. The Schofield Study Bible, we have a link for it that you can order through us, not really from us, but through us. You know what I'm saying? But get a good Bible, and we suggest the Schofield Study Bible, because in this Bible, it shows that the verse before is the daughters of Jerusalem speaking, where it says, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? O thou fairest among women. It's not Solomon speaking, but it's the daughters of Jerusalem who are speaking. What is thy beloved more than another beloved, that thou dost so charge us, that you give us this imperative or this commandment? And now the bride answers. The bride answers this right here in verse 10. My beloved is white and ruddy, the chiefest among 10,000. Now many of them would even try to take this verse, Europeans and other white supremacists, white theological supremacists, they would try to take this verse and say that this verse right here is speaking about Solomon being white. But it's not describing Solomon's complexion. It's actually describing, the first part, the white part, is not describing his complexion. It's actually describing his garment. Now, how do we know this? We know this based on what Jesus Christos, what Yehoshua HaMoshiach tells us in the Gospels. Now, when we compare Song of Songs 5 and 10, to understand the white is referring to the garment, with Matthew 6 and 29, it says, and yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. He was not dressed. He was not garbed like one of these. Compare that with Luke 12:27 says, consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say to you all that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Solomon did not wear a bunch of funny colors. He didn't wear kente cloth. You understand? He didn't wear, these different kind of African garments. He wore the standard garment of righteousness of the scripture. You understand? Which is what we find that the holy Ethiopians also wore. When we look at the historical documentation, the pictures, he wore the white garments. Comes from there. Now, as far as Solomon being jet black, that's another misinterpretation of the scripture, because we don't read the Hebrew and we don't study it in the Royal Amharic, or we don't study in the language that shows the gender. You see, everything that we read in the language in the Bible is a gender.